The year was 1883. Dust was a constant companion in the small, hard-scrabble town of Havenwood, clinging to everything, coating aspirations and disappointments alike. It settled on the rough-hewn boardwalks, in the parched creases of sun-weathered faces, and thickest of all, it seemed, inside the low-slung building that housed the Golden Spur saloon. Here, beneath the flickering, smoky light of oil lamps, Clara spent her nights. Her days were spent in a small, stifling room behind the saloon, a room that smelled faintly of stale beer and desperation. It wasn't much, just enough space for a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a single small window that offered a sliver of dusty sky, but it was home, or at least it was shelter. And it was sanctuary for the one person who mattered more than the next dollar or the leering eyes of drunken patrons. That person was Henry. Henry was 7 years old, though he looked younger, small and fragile. He was a quiet boy with large, solemn brown eyes and a mop of unruly dark hair. His legs, thin and misshapen from birth, refused to carry him. He moved with the aid of crutches, cumbersome wooden things almost as tall as he was, or sometimes crawled when his arms tired. The world outside the small room was a vast, intimidating place for him, full of obstacles and cruel laughter. Clara had arrived in Havenwood 2 years prior, a widow with nothing but the clothes on her back and a child she carried in her arms. Her husband, Thomas, had been a prospector, chasing dreams of gold that evaporated like morning mist. He died not from a cave-in or a claim dispute, but from a simple fever that gripped him in a drafty cabin high in the mountains. Clara was left alone, far from any family she could remember, with a child who needed constant care and a future that looked impossibly bleak. Saloon work was the only work available that paid enough to keep them fed and sheltered, barely. It paid in tips and bruised dignity, in muttered insults and the weight of judging eyes. Clara had learned to build walls around herself, stone by stone. She kept her interactions brief, her smile practiced and empty, her gaze steady but distant. She was the quiet one, the one who didn't laugh loud or flirt back. She served the drinks, cleared the tables, and counted the minutes until she could retreat to her small room and be with Henry. Henry understood, in his own way, what she did. He knew the saloon was a place she went to earn money, a place he could not go. He spent his days with worn-out books Clara managed to find or traded for, and carving small, misshapen animals from scraps of wood with a dull knife. His world was small, but within it he held a quiet strength, a resilience that mirrored his mother's, though hers was outwardly harder. Clara watched him, her heart aching with a love so fierce it was a physical pain. She saw his longing, the way his eyes followed the birds outside the window, the way he listened to the distant sounds of children playing. He was trapped, not just by his legs, but by their circumstances, by the harsh realities of a frontier town that had little patience or kindness for those who didn't fit neatly into its rough-and-tumble pattern. She tried to teach him things, reading from her few books, showing him how to mend clothes, how to count the coins she brought back. But she couldn't teach him how to run, how to jump, how to feel the freedom of movement that other children took for granted. It gnawed at her, a constant, low-level despair beneath the surface of her stoicism. One afternoon, as Clara was folding a worn blanket, Henry was near the window, his crutches leaning against the wall. Music drifted faintly from the saloon below. A raucous piano tune, lively and fast-paced. Clara had grown to hate the saloon's music. It was the soundtrack to her burden. But Henry tilted his head, listening. He tapped his fingers on the windowsill, a small, hesitant rhythm. Then he gripped the sill and tried to lift himself, his thin arms trembling. He managed to pull his torso up, his legs dangling uselessly below. He closed his eyes for a moment, swaying slightly to the distant beat. Clara froze, watching him. Her first instinct was fear. Fear he would fall. Fear he would hurt himself. But then she saw the expression on his face. It wasn't sadness or frustration. It was something else, a kind of quiet concentration, a yearning that transcended his physical limitations. He wasn't trying to walk, he was trying to move with the music, he was trying to dance. The sight twisted something inside Clara. It was a sharp, painful reminder of what he couldn't do, but also a revelation of his spirit. He wanted to participate, to feel the joy of movement, even if it was only in his imagination. That night, after the saloon had closed and the last drunk had stumbled out, Clara sat by Henry's bed. The air was still thick with smoke and the smell of spilled whiskey. He was asleep, his breathing shallow. She looked at his crutches leaning against the wall, then at his small, still legs beneath the blanket. An idea, born of desperation and fierce love, began to form. It was a foolish, impossible idea, but it was Henry's idea, born from his quiet yearning. The next day, during her few hours free, Clara didn't rest. She found a sympathetic older woman in town who sometimes helped mend things for the saloon. She asked about fabric, strong but pliable. She explained vaguely that she needed to make something for her son, something that would help him with exercises. The woman, Martha, was kind but practical. She looked at Clara with a mixture of pity and curiosity. She didn't ask about Henry's legs, didn't offer unsolicited advice. She just showed Clara bolts of cloth and spools of thread. Clara bought sturdy canvas and strong cord. Back in her small room, she began to work in secret. She measured Henry's legs, his waist, his arms. She cut and sewed, her fingers clumsy with the unfamiliar tools. She worked when Henry was absorbed in his books, when he was asleep. It was slow, painstaking work. She was trying to build a harness, a system of straps and supports that might, just might, allow her to hold him, to support his weight while his feet touched the ground. Not to walk, not truly. But maybe to feel the rhythm, to move in place, to stand, even briefly, and feel the floor beneath his feet while music played. It was madness, she knew it. But the image of Henry swaying by the window, his eyes closed, haunted her. Days turned into a week. Her fingers were sore, pricked by needles. The canvas was stiff, the cord rough. She finished it late one night, a contraption of straps and buckles that looked more like a saddle than anything meant for a child. She tried it on Henry the next afternoon, her hands trembling. He looked at it with wide, questioning eyes. Clara knelt before him, her voice soft. It's so Mama can hold you, Henry, so you can stand with me." Carefully, she fitted the padded straps around his small chest and waist, attaching the cords to loops she had sewn onto a wide belt she would wear. She stood up, taking the strain. Henry gasped. His feet, encased in worn boots, were flat on the floor. He was standing. He gripped his crutches out of habit, but he didn't need them for support, not like this. He was suspended, supported by Clara's strength, but upright. A small, wobbly smile spread across his face. "Mama?" Clara felt a rush of emotion, a mix of triumph and heartbreak. Triumph that it worked, heartbreak that this was the only way he could stand. She held him steady, feeling the slight weight of him. "Yes, Henry," she whispered, her voice thick. "You're standing." She began to move slowly, a gentle swaying. She hummed a tune, a quiet, simple melody from her own childhood. Henry watched her feet, then looked down at his own, touching the floor. He shifted his weight, a tiny, experimental movement. He couldn't move his legs independently, but as Clara swayed, she could feel the subtle shift in his posture, the way his body responded to the rhythm she created. He wasn't walking, he wasn't jumping, but he was moving. With her. They practiced in the small room, away from prying eyes. Clara would hum or sing softly, holding Henry, supporting him, swaying and stepping gently. He learned to feel the cadence, to anticipate the shift in her weight. His initial fear gave way to a quiet delight. His solemn eyes would light up. "Again, Mama," he'd say, his voice small but eager. It was their secret dance, a fragile blossom in the dusty confines of their lives. It was not the wild, joyful dance of children in the street, but it was theirs. It was movement, connection, a shared moment of grace. The town of Havenwood was growing, fueled by the nearby cattle ranches. Among the most prominent figures was Walter Vance, the owner of the sprawling Double V Ranch. He was a man of considerable wealth and influence, gruff and imposing, with a reputation for being fair but unyielding. He frequented the Golden Spur when he was in town on business, sitting alone at a corner table, his presence commanding a wide berth. He never spoke much, just drank his whiskey and observed the chaotic world of the saloon with a detached, often critical, gaze. Clara served him when necessary, her movements efficient and impersonal. He never seemed to notice her beyond the function she performed. He was a powerful, distant figure, part of the world that she and Henry existed on the fringes of. The idea to bring Henry into the saloon was born of a moment of reckless courage, or perhaps sheer desperation. It was a Saturday night, the saloon was packed and particularly lively. A traveling musician, a fiddler, was playing, and the music was infectious, filling the room with a wild, foot-stomping energy. Henry, in their room above, was tapping his fingers harder than usual. Clara could hear his soft sighs, the familiar sound of his quiet longing. She looked at the harness, hidden beneath a pile of clothes. She looked at Henry, his face turned towards the music, a familiar sadness touching his eyes. Tonight, she decided, tonight would be different. She dressed Henry in his best clothes, a patched but clean shirt and trousers. She fastened the harness carefully, hiding it mostly beneath his shirt. She secured the loops, checking the knots. She wore her own belt over her dress, making sure the attachment points were discreet. "We're going downstairs," she said, her voice betraying none of the tremor in her hands. Henry's eyes widened. "Downstairs? To the saloon?" "Just for a little while," she said, "to listen to the music. You can stand with Mama like we practiced." Fear warred with excitement on his face. "But, people—" "I'll be right there," she promised, kneeling to look him in the eye. "Nobody will hurt you, we'll just listen." Getting him downstairs was a slow, arduous process, navigating the narrow, creaking staircase with his crutches and her supporting hand. She timed their descent for a moment when the main doors were clear. The noise hit them first, a wave of sound, laughter, conversation, and the driving rhythm of the fiddle. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of sweat and liquor. Henry flinched, his eyes wide with apprehension. Clara held his hand tightly. She guided him to a relatively empty space near the wall, slightly away from the main crush of people. She fastened the cords from his harness to her belt, feeling the familiar slight pull as she took his weight. She stood behind him, her hands on his waist, supporting him. Henry stood between her legs, leaning back against her strength. His small boots were on the wooden floor. He was in the saloon. He was standing. He gripped his crutches, his knuckles white, but his gaze was fixed on the fiddler, whose bow danced across the strings. The music was loud here, vibrant, pulsating. It filled the air, vibrated through the floorboards. Slowly, cautiously, Clara began to sway. Just a little at first, a gentle rock back and forth. Henry tensed, then slowly relaxed against her, his grip on the crutches loosened slightly. She increased the movement, a slow, steady rhythm. She felt him respond, a subtle shift in his small body. He wasn't trying to move his legs, but his torso, his head, his arms moved with her. People noticed. Of course they noticed. A woman from the saloon, usually only seen behind the bar or serving drinks, standing in the corner with a child, holding him upright. Whispers started. Glances were exchanged. Some were curious, some indifferent, some openly disapproving. A saloon was no place for a child, especially one like that. Clara felt the stares, the weight of their judgment. Her walls went back up, higher and thicker. She ignored them, focusing only on Henry, on the music, on the small, impossible dance they were sharing. Henry, oblivious to the scrutiny, was lost in the music. His head bobbed slightly. His free hand, the one not gripping a crutch, lifted tentatively, his fingers mimicking the motion of the fiddler's bow. Clara risked a small smile, a genuine one this time. "It's nice music, isn't it, Henry?" He nodded, his eyes bright. A spark of pure joy, untainted by his circumstances, flickered in their depths. As the fiddler launched into a particularly lively reel, the tempo picked up. Clara, caught in the moment, unable to deny Henry this sliver of normalcy, increased her pace. She stepped side to side, a simple shuffle, her body supporting his completely. And Henry, supported by his mother's strength and fueled by the infectious rhythm, began to move with her. He wasn't walking, but his small body swayed, his head tossed back slightly, a genuine, unrestrained smile splitting his face. His free hand no longer mimicked the bow. It reached out, fingers splayed, grasping at the vibrant, unseen energy of the music. It was not a dance in the traditional sense, it was a shared motion, a mother holding her child, helping him defy gravity and limitation for a few precious moments. It was awkward, clumsy, beautiful, and utterly heartbreaking. The crowd had quieted slightly, their attention drawn to the corner. The whispers had died down, replaced by a strange collective hush. People stopped drinking, stopped talking. All eyes were on Clara and Henry, this small, defiant act of joy in the heart of the Golden Spur saloon. Among those watching was Walter Vance. He sat at his usual table, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had been observing the scene unfold from the moment Clara and Henry appeared. His expression, usually unreadable, was intent. He watched Clara's face, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. He watched Henry's face, the pure, unadulterated delight. As the music swelled and Clara and Henry swayed, a profound silence settled over the saloon. It wasn't a judgmental silence, not entirely. It was a silence of unexpected witnessing, of a moment that didn't fit the rough edges of their lives. Then, as the reel reached its peak, Walter Vance did something no one expected. He was a man who rarely moved from his seat unless it was to leave. But now, slowly, deliberately, he set his glass down on the table. He rose from his chair. His movement was quiet, deliberate. In the sudden silence, it was profoundly noticeable. He was a large man, his presence filling the space he occupied. Every eye in the saloon turned to him. Clara froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Had she gone too far? Was he about to order them out? To complain about the child? Fear, sharp and cold, pierced through the warmth of the moment. Henry, sensing her tension, stopped swaying and looked up at her, his smile fading. Walter Vance didn't look at Clara. He looked past her, at Henry. His gaze, usually sharp and assessing, held something new, something softer. Then, he did the second unexpected thing. He lifted his hands. And he began to clap. The sound was loud in the silent room, just a single man clapping, but it was Walter Vance, the cattle baron, the man of influence. One clap, two claps, slow, steady, deliberate. The silence held for another beat. Then, slowly, hesitantly, others in the saloon began to join him. First one person, then another. A few cowboys, a couple of miners, even the burly bouncer near the door. The scattered applause grew, gaining hesitant momentum until it filled the room, mingling with the final, fading notes of the fiddle. It wasn't thunderous applause, but it was genuine. It was acknowledgement. It was, incredibly, acceptance. Clara stared at Walter Vance, then at the faces of the people around her. The judgment was gone, replaced by something akin to awe, or maybe just simple human recognition. Henry, startled by the sound, looked around, his eyes wide. He saw the smiles, the nods. He saw the applause wasn't directed at his disability, but at his small, brave act of joy. A flush spread across his cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and pride. He leaned back against Clara, a shaky exhale leaving his lips. Walter Vance held his gaze on Henry for a moment longer. Then he nodded slowly, a gesture that felt profound. He didn't say a word. He simply resumed his seat, picked up his glass, and took a slow sip of his whiskey, returning to his silent observation, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But everything had changed. The fiddler, catching the mood shift, launched into a slower, sweeter tune. People began to talk again, but the atmosphere was different. Softer. The raw edge had been taken off. Clara gently swayed with Henry to the new music, her hands still on his waist. The fear had receded, replaced by a profound sense of shock and gratitude. Walter Vance, the gruff, distant cattle baron, had not cast them out. He had offered the first, crucial gesture of acceptance. They stayed for a little while longer, Henry happily leaning against her, swaying gently, listening to the music. The stares had faded. They were no longer the spectacle, they were just present. Before the night ended, as Clara was clearing a nearby table, Walter Vance called her over. Her stomach tightened, a leftover knot of apprehension. "Yes, Mr. Vance?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. He looked up at her, his gaze steady. "That your boy?" "Yes, Mr. Vance, that's Henry." He was silent for a moment, studying her face, then Henry's, who was watching them with cautious curiosity. "He's got spirit." It was the first kind word she'd heard about Henry from a stranger, perhaps the first kind word about anything related to her life here. Clara's carefully constructed walls trembled. "Yes, Mr. Vance, he does." He took another slow sip of whiskey. Hard life for a boy like that, For his mother, too. It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact. Clara didn't respond. What could she say? Yes, it was hard. It was a mountain she climbed every day. He likes the music, Vance observed. He does, Clara agreed softly. He likes to feel it. Vance nodded, a slow, thoughtful movement. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. My office at the Double V livery. You and the boy. Be there. It was an order, not a request. Clara was stunned. The Double V livery was across town, part of Vance's expansive operation. Why would he want them there? Was he going to offer charity, pity? She recoiled inwardly at the thought. She didn't want pity, but she didn't know what she wanted. A chance for Henry. Mr. Vance, she asked, hesitant. Why? He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw something flicker behind his eyes that wasn't just assessment, something almost weary. Just be there, woman. Don't be late. And with that, the conversation was over. He turned back to his drink, his face once again the impassive mask. Clara spent a sleepless night. What did Walter Vance want? Was this a test? A trap? The frontier had taught her to be wary of unexpected offers, especially from powerful men. But it was for Henry. The memory of Henry's joyful face, lit by the music, spurred her on. She would go. She had to. The next morning, Clara and Henry navigated the dusty streets of Havenwood. Henry managing his crutches with practiced effort, Clara walking close beside him, her heart a drumbeat of anxiety. The Double V livery was a large, well-kept building, a stark contrast to the ramshackle structures of the saloon district. They found Vance in a small, tidy office at the back. He was seated at a large desk, looking through ledgers. He looked up as they entered, his expression unreadable. You came, he stated. You asked us to, Mr. Vance, Clara replied, standing defensively in front of Henry. He gestured to two chairs facing his desk. Sit. They sat. Henry's crutches clattered softly against the floor. He looked nervous, clinging to Clara's arm. Vance leaned back in his chair. He didn't offer coffee or pleasantries. He got straight to it. I saw your boy last night, he said. Saw him dancing. Clara flinched slightly at the word, feeling a wave of protectiveness. It wasn't dancing. Not really. He has a condition, Mr. Vance, she explained softly. He can't use his legs properly. I know that, Vance said, his voice gravelly. Didn't ask you for a diagnosis, woman. I said I saw him dancing. With your help. He paused, his eyes fixing on her. Takes grit, both of you. Clara didn't know how to respond. Grit? She supposed she had grit. She had to. Look, Vance said, shifting forward. Life out here is hard, hardest on folks who don't fit the mold, a woman alone, a boy who can't walk. He paused again, his gaze flicking to Henry, who was watching him with wide, solemn eyes. Reminded me of someone. He didn't elaborate. Clara didn't ask. I got no family, Vance continued, his voice low. Lost my wife years ago, my son, well, he didn't take to ranch life, left when he was young, haven't heard from him in years, just me and the ranch. It was the most personal thing she had ever heard him say, or anyone say in the Golden Spur for that matter. It was a crack in the facade of the powerful cattle baron, loneliness. She recognized it instantly. It was the same companion she lived with. That saloon work, Vance said, his tone hardening slightly. It's no life for a woman with a child, especially not for him. He gestured towards Henry. Clara bristled. It's the only work there is, Mr. Vance. It keeps a roof over our heads and food in his belly. There are other ways, Vance said. I need someone reliable, someone honest, to manage the household at the main ranch house, cook, clean, keep things in order. My foreman's wife used to do it, but she's sickly now, pays steady, quarters are good, a room for you, a room for the boy, warm in the winter, safe. Clara stared at him, dumbfounded. The main ranch house. It was legendary in the area for its size and relative luxury. A real home. Safety. For Henry. You would hire me? To run your house? She stammered. She was a saloon waitress. People didn't offer women like her positions like that. Not unless. My house needs running, Vance said, cutting off her unspoken thoughts. I need someone who isn't afraid of hard work. Someone who won't steal me blind. I saw you with your boy. I saw how you look after him. That tells me enough. He didn't mention the dancing. He didn't mention Henry's legs. He just mentioned the care she showed, the grit. "What about Henry?" Clara asked, her voice tight. "He would be there, at the ranch?" "He'd be with you," Vance confirmed. "Plenty of space, fresh air. My foreman, Thomas, and his wife, Mary, live nearby. Mary's not well enough to work, but she's a good woman. Might be some company for the boy." And Vance hesitated for a fraction of a second, a rare uncertainty in his demeanor. "There's work I need done in the office, simple tasks. Sorting receipts, copying letters. If the boy's able, he could earn his keep, give him something to do, keep his mind sharp." He was offering Henry work, meaning a chance to be useful, not just a burden. It was more than Clara had ever dared to dream. "Mr. Vance," she began, emotion clogging her throat. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take the job," he stated. "Start next week. Pack your things. I'll send a wagon for you." It was happening too fast. It felt unreal. A rich cattle baron, offering a saloon waitress and her crippled son a home and a chance. It defied everything she knew about how the world worked. "Why, Mr. Vance?" she asked again, needing to understand the motivation behind this unexpected kindness. Was it pity? Was it loneliness? Was it seeing that spark in Henry's eyes? Vance leaned back again, his gaze distant. He looked out the window at the dusty street, but he seemed to be seeing something else. "Like I said, he reminded me of someone." He paused, then added in a low voice, "Saw a lot of folks with grit in my life, lost a few too, the ones who didn't have it. But the ones who do, they deserve a chance." He looked back at Clara. "Do you have grit, woman?" Clara met his gaze. She thought of the endless nights in the saloon, the ache in her feet, the weary smile she pasted on. She thought of the quiet struggle in her small room, trying to shield Henry from the world's cruelty, trying to give him even the smallest moments of joy. She thought of the clumsy harness and their secret dance. "Yes, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice firm. "I have grit." "Good," he said, a hint of something that might have been satisfaction in his tone. "Then the job is yours." They left the Double V livery in a daze. The sun seemed brighter, the dust less oppressive. Henry was unusually quiet on the way back, watching the world with new eyes. "Mama?" he asked finally, his voice small. "We're going to live at the ranch?" "Yes, Henry," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "We are." "And I can help Mr. Vance?" "Yes, you can help." He was silent again, processing this immense shift in their reality. Then, a tentative smile touched his lips, spreading slowly, genuinely. It was the same smile she'd seen in the saloon, the one lit by music and a forbidden joy. Life at the Double V ranch was different. It was hard work, but it was clean work, honest work. The ranch house was large and comfortable, with real beds and windows that looked out onto wide open spaces instead of a narrow alley. Henry had his own room, small but bright, where he could carve his animals and read his books in peace. Walter Vance was a stern employer, demanding but fair. He didn't interact with Clara much beyond giving instructions regarding the household, but there was a new undertone of respect in his voice. He treated Henry with a quiet consideration, sometimes asking him about his carving or the books he was reading. He set up a small desk for Henry in the ranch office, where the boy, despite the difficulty of holding a pen with hands used to crutches, painstakingly began to copy letters and organize papers. It was slow, challenging work, but it gave Henry a sense of purpose he'd never known. The foreman, Thomas, and his wife, Mary, were welcoming. Mary, though frail, had a gentle spirit and would sometimes sit with Henry, sharing stories or teaching him about the plants in her small garden. For Henry, it was the first time he'd had anything resembling a normal connection outside of his mother. Clara still carried the weight of the past, the loss of Thomas, the years of struggle, but the crushing isolation began to recede. She had Henry, she had work that offered dignity, and she had, in the most unexpected way, found a measure of acceptance. One evening, months after they had arrived, after dinner was cleared and Henry was settled in his room, Clara was tidying the main parlor. Walter Vance was in his chair by the fire, reading. He looked up as she passed. "Clara." She stopped. "Yes, Mr. Vance?" He hesitated, then set his book down. "The boy, he seems happier here." "He is, Mr. Vance," Clara said softly. Thank you. He waved a dismissive hand. He earns his keep, works hard. He does, she agreed, a quiet pride in her voice. He was silent for a moment, watching the flames. What you did for him, he said finally, his voice gruff. In that saloon, that took courage. Clara's heart warmed. He remembered. He had seen it, truly seen it. He just wanted to feel the music, Mr. Vance, to move like everyone else. Vance nodded slowly. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in how you walk, but in how you stand, and who stands with you. It was a profound statement, coming from a man of so few words. It spoke of the loneliness he carried, the loss he had hinted at. And it spoke, too, of the unexpected connection that had formed between them, born of a shared moment in a smoky saloon, sparked by a crippled boy's desire to dance. Life wasn't magically easy. Henry still couldn't walk. Clara still worked hard every day. Prejudice existed, though less overtly here on the ranch than in the rough town, but they had found a haven. They had found a place where they were valued, not judged. They had found a quiet strength together, a mother and her son, and a lonely cattle baron who had seen something of himself in their struggle and offered a hand up instead of a hand out. The ranch house, with its solid walls and warm fire, had become their home. And in the quiet evenings, sometimes when the work was done and Henry was asleep, Clara would find herself humming a soft tune, swaying almost imperceptibly, remembering a moment in a smoky saloon when her son, held in her arms, had danced, and a rich man had risen from his chair to show them that even in the harshest of worlds, unexpected kindness could bloom. The dust of Havenwood still coated the plains outside, but here, inside these walls, hope had found fertile ground. It was a quiet, enduring hope, built not on grand gestures, but on small acts of courage, resilience, and the simple, powerful acknowledgement of one human being by another.